All right. Let us start.
What do you got for us?
If you could spend the weekend in any city, which would you choose?
The weekend.
Dude, any city. I gotta broaden my horizons. I immediately
city.
just thought of like U.S. and I'm like, wait, no,
Yeah.
any.
I was like San Antonio.
Worldwide. Worldwide.
Any city. Oh.
Where would
Golly.
you go?
There's, I don't even know the name of the city, but there's a small town, city, or whatever in Switzerland that I've seen on several like travel things and like hidden gem like videos and stuff. And it's just like the town got stuck in a certain era and has never left. Like nobody drives cars, nothing. There's no cell towers. And it's gorgeous.
Bruges.
I don't know, maybe, but it's a very beautiful place. They're in a valley, and so everywhere around you is just the most magnificent mountains. Everything's super green. The sky is very, very blue, and then all the houses are like those cottages covered in vines and stuff, and like they have like bright colored doors, so like bright blue, bright red, yellow.
Wow.
And it's the coolest town, and everybody like works with their hands. They're farmers or cattle or goats and stuff like that, and ride bikes. And I was like, dude, if I could spend a weekend anywhere to like decompress, get away,
Right.
it would be whatever this town is in Switzerland. It's amazing. Sounds great. If anybody's listening, you can comment if you know what town that is.
If you've ever been. Yeah.
Yeah, if you've ever been. Or you can like send me a link to the National Geographic video it was on.
There's so many places I'd like to go, but the first place that came to my mind was Chicago. I'd like to go back.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool place.
It was fun to visit, and I got to watch my favorite football team play, so that was pretty rad.
That's right. He's a Bears fan.
Bears, the Bears.
The Bears. Yeah.
Nice.
Bakers doesn't.
Nice. I guess for me, I don't know.
He held that one.
London,
draw it out.
London, maybe.
London.
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to London once and really enjoyed it. And it's a really cool town. There's a lot happening there, just a bustle of people. And I didn't even see half of it. So, I mean, I didn't even see a quarter of it.
Yeah.
So I've always wanted to go and then take my family with me and then just kind of just relive that experience. It was a lot of fun. So there you go. London.
Yeah. I'm with Lee. I think I would go London. I've never been to Europe.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I think that's what I would pick at a bunch of shows and whatnot that and everything's
Yeah.
there. And I'm
It's-
like,
It's kind of, it's kind of,
It's a cool
New York, LA all rolled into one.
Yeah, it's a cool scene because you've got a lot of culture that comes from there that's influenced a lot of places in the world. So
I think my other thing, I've of course wanted to go visit the ancestral home,
oh right, yeah.
you know, Scotland, Ireland, and all of that. So I would like to also go to Dublin.
yeah, we've talked about that in
London, So
some other podcasts too. So I mean, there's a lot of places. That
There's
we
a ton.
love to spend weekends at.
I want to go to Dubai.
It is funny because
Dubai.
my brain went immediately to the U.S. as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah,
Same.
worldwide.
Yeah, we can go anywhere.
Yeah.
Shoot, I just was like Houston. I was like Houston.
I'm gonna go to
I just want to hear Land for a
Pearland.
second.
Let's go to Sugarland. Yeah, we're going to go to Galveston, and then I was like, oh, San Antonio, and then I was like, wait a second,
What
he
am I
said
doing?
anywhere.
Yeah.
I was like, wow,
I haven't
okay.
been to Sweeney in a while.
Going out to Bailey's Perry.
You know, West Columbia's got a new coffee shop. Yeah.
Shout out
Right.
to all of our circumferencing cities.
Great places,
Yes,
but I could get there today if I had to.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah.
no doubt.
Not London. All right. Well, with that,
Yep.
welcome to the podcast.
Today, we embark on a solemn and reflective journey as we remember and honor a day that forever changed the course of history. Today, we pause to commemorate the event of 2 decades ago, a day that shook the world and left a mark on our collective consciousness, a day that unfolded with unimaginable tragedy, but also one that showcased the resilience, unity, and strength of the human spirit. So join us as we embark on this journey of remembrance, reflection, and reverence as we talk about September 11th.
Yeah.
Okay.
This might be the heaviest, maybe the deepest podcast we've had up until this point.
Yeah.
We've had moments leading up to this one that were kind of heavy. So any listeners right now that are tuning in, maybe this is the first time you're even listening to us. Just kind of a warning right off the bat. We're going to dive into some stuff that could be traumatic, maybe for people's memories. Maybe you've experienced this before with 9/11. But just want to let you guys know we're going to be talking about this subject today, and it can be a little bit heavy. So as we get started here, we're going to dive into kind of the first question that everybody talks about when you reflect back on 9/11, and that is, where were you when it happened? Like, where were you on that day? So, Jason, I know you had a unique experience with this, and I want to have you kick us off and tell us what that looked like.
Yeah. So I was in the military at the time. I was in the Navy. I had just gotten married.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. August 30th. I had just gotten married. I'd flown into Texas to get married. Spent like a week here. Flew back out to California, got on a carrier, and we went up to Seattle, I think, for like a fleet week or something. And then when that was done, we were on our way back, so out in the Pacific Ocean somewhere, back to San Diego. And I had just gotten off of like a night watch and was heading back to berthing. And like people were, just kind of gathering around or whatever. And it was kind of an odd thing. Everybody was quiet but watching. There were several people like yelling about World War III. And yeah, like I just remember kind of looking at the television. The first tower had just been hit, I think, at that point when I was walking in. And then, I started to watch and then actually saw the second. But there was this weird feeling in the room because, like I said, we're in the military, we're in the Navy. We're the next ship that's on the schedule to go out. So we were supposed to go and relieve the ship that was out there in the Middle East. And so we've been doing all the power testing and everything to get ready. And, in that moment of watching that happen, I think everybody in that room knew if this is foreign, right? Like if it's any other country, we're leaving tomorrow. Like that's
right.
Right. We should have another year before we go, but like this changes everything.
Yeah.
And up to this point, everybody that I knew hadn't really served in any dangerous place, right? Like, I mean, there was a few who had been in for a long time, but for the most part, it was just world crews, go around, stopped a few ports, and at this point, everybody's now, okay, this is real, and we're about to have to go out, and we might not come back.
Yeah.
Wow. And so there was that sense of that in everybody, and most of the people around me were, they're like 18, 20 years old. So yeah, I mean, it was a weird experience. And then Jackie my wife was actually supposed to fly in September 12th. So that, because we just got married, and obviously that didn't happen because all the airports and stuff were closed.
Right.
Yeah, but so I was off in the Pacific Ocean somewhere. We were supposed to pull in the next day, and the safest place for a ship to be is out of port. So they were like, "Don't come back," and so we just stayed out there for a while they kind of figured everything out. So,
wow,
that's intense.
Yeah.
Happy marriage day to you.
I know.
Yeah.
So sounds like quite the honeymoon.
Well, we got back to port, and they basically said, "Hey, everybody's going to get 2 weeks off. We'll time it so that we can get everybody 2 weeks vacation, and then we're gone." So the day before my birthday,
wow,
we took off, and we hit a couple of ports on the way out. Other than that, it was pretty much like 3.5 months of just doing figure eights in the Indian Ocean. And anything that you saw on the news, like bombs dropping, anything like that, that was our crew. Again, just a weird experience every day. They would fill up the hangar bay with ordnance, bombs, whatever. They'd load them up on planes every night. They'd empty the hangar bay.
Yeah.
And that was like 3.5 months
Wow.
of,
That's a lot of ordnance to carry.
oh yeah.
Thousands a day.
I mean,
Every day another ship would pull up
and
we'd reload and then they would just go drop it.
that's crazy.
Yeah. It's it was a weird experience. You know, as I thought back, like I personally was not involved in the loss of life, but the crew that I was with was definitely responsible for the loss of life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you have definitely the heavy story, probably of any of us here. Mine is probably I'm the youngest here. I think by 8 years or something. So mine was I was pretty young and I was in school. And I remember it just being I was in science class, right? And my teacher, we've been learning about electricity and like how pathways flow and everything like that with storage of batteries and lights and everything. And I remember we're in one of those lessons in the middle of class, and another teacher opens the door, kind of looking frazzled, disheveled, and she runs into my teacher and whispers in her ear, and then kind of runs back out the door. And I hear her as she's leaving say, "Yeah, turn on the TV." And so my teacher stops what we're doing. Doesn't really think anything's too crazy. She's like, "All right, class, just hold on 1 second. We're going to turn on the TV and check the news real quick." And so, and we still have those big like cube TVs hanging from the ceiling. So she turns the TV on and switches over to the news. And literally like within a second after she turns it on, that's when we all saw the second tower get hit. And
Like
all
live.
of it, live. Yeah.
Yeah.
And us kids, we were just kind of confused. Like where is that? What just happened? And I know my teacher like gasped and like she couldn't believe what just happened. And she was like trying to talk to us, but was also just like completely absorbed in what was going on the TV. And so I remember the rest of the class, we're just sitting there watching the news unfold, and there wasn't a whole lot of broadcasting, like a person saying what's going on, because nobody could speak. You just had cameras shooting. And I remember the newscaster, you just heard, like they were kind of pausing, like, I believe the second tower just got, I'm not sure if this is an accident. They're like completely confused. And so are we. And I remember school just like ending, like parents started showing up in the middle of our class and we're taking their kids out. And school was pretty much done at that point. I remember getting
early
let
in
out.
the day too.
Yeah, it was early in the morning. And by lunchtime we were all home. Like I remember I lived pretty close to home. So I just walked home when they let everybody go. And, for the rest of the day, that's all it was the news was on, and every TV in your home, that's what it was on. We were listening, we were talking, trying to figure out what was going on. And it took over from then on out. Like there was not a day that went by that we didn't watch or talk about that. And it took a while for me to understand fully what happened. I don't even know how young I was, but it took a bit. Like I knew something was off. I knew people had lost their lives. I knew it was serious.
Yeah.
It was very obvious that it was serious. Even in that moment where I just thought a plane accidentally hit a building. Like I thought that was really tragic. And then as the story unfolded and I became more aware of what was going on, like there was like a deep settling kind of fear of what was going to come of this. So that's what I remember of that day, just being in school and everything kind of coming to a halt from seeing that on TV.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
I was a youth minister at the time. I was actually in the fellowship hall painting the walls and, listening to the radio. And then someone came, the broadcast was interrupted and they said something about one of the twin towers being potentially hit by an airplane. And as soon as I heard that, I booked it to our youth room and turned on the TV. And I sat in front of the TV for the next, hour, maybe two. Same as you. Basically, I was watching what was going down, and then watched live as the plane hit the second tower, and just thinking to myself, "What in the world is happening?" But this is real. This is real.
Yeah.
It just kept going all over in my head. Ran home after that. Turned on the TV. I don't know that, everybody at home knew what was happening. The kids were obviously too small to, know what was going on. But I remember you talking about it, the news being on all day long. I put this is how long ago. I put a VHS tape in and just hit record. So I literally have a whole VHS tape that's just raw news from that day.
Wow.
Just hearing everybody trying to speculate. It's a lot of the same stuff over and over and over and again. And of course, since nobody knows what's happening, and they're just as blown away too. They're trying to figure out what to do. And a lot of these the news shows that were on, they weren't local. They were like the news shows from in New York. So they're trying to figure out what's going on. It's just down the road from them. And, I'm sure they're thinking, do I need to leave? But they stuck it out. And I just remember, just being stuck in front of the TV all day long, hoping like everybody else, I'm sure, for answers, wondering, it's the same thing. It was just the same stuff being said over and over. Cause like I said, they didn't know what to say. And I remember later on that evening, they were interviewing someone from Israel. I don't know why, but they were interviewing someone from Israel, and he seemed very indignant, might be the word. I don't know. He seemed very just like dismissive about this whole thing. And he goes, I don't know what the big deal is. And I just remember I was just, that took me aback, and I was a little bit offended. Like, what do you mean you don't know what the big deal is? Like, these two planes just hit, these towers and they collapsed, and thousands of people just lost their lives. And, he goes, man, every day my kids go to school and I don't know if they're coming home.
Yeah.
We get rockets shot at us and bombs that go off all around us every day. Yeah. And I don't know if my kids are even coming home from school every day. So this is like an everyday thing for me. So I don't understand what the big deal is. So there was one of those moments where I was frustrated. I don't say I was angry, but there was a moment of like, how dare this guy? But then it's that perspective of, oh yeah. Yeah. But then I had to pause and be like, well, this doesn't happen to us every day. So it's kind of a big deal. Not to dismiss what he has to go through or what his family has to go through on the daily. But I think that was just one of the reality checks of the moment for me with all of that going, man, I'm so, it's so easy to be, our life in this little shell, our life in this little box or whatever. And we don't see everything going on in the rest of the world. And we just become consumed with what's happening around us. And I think that's one of the big things that, that day did.
Perspective shift.
Yeah, for me, was that.
Yeah. What about you, Lee?
Yeah, so I was going to college at Brazosport College at the time. And I had pre-ordered the POD satellite album. Yep. It came out that day. And so I jumped in my car. I went to a class that morning. I jumped in my car, headed to the Sunshine Christian Bookstore in downtown Lake Jackson.
Remember that. And
I walk in, and everybody is freaking out. I mean, there's just a weird vibe in the air, and people are, and then there's it sounds like the radio is on in this Christian bookstore, and normally it's like, Twyla Paris or something. Anyway, so, I walk in and it's just like, what in the world is going on? What's the radio doing on? And then there's people kind of get a TV, and I'm like, what is happening? And Shane Newby's like, did you hear? And I was like, did I hear what? He goes, there was a plane hit the World Trade Center. And I was like, what? And he's like, and I was like, in New York? And he's like, yeah, in New York. And I was like, oh. And I was like, well, what's going on? Like, do they know? And he goes, no, they don't know. And you hear it, like, and now we're telling you. And they didn't know what was going on. They're as clueless as the rest of us. And so I just was like, wow, this is crazy. I need to get home to, still living with the family, my parents. And so I need to get home and just let's just, and so, it was really interesting. So I went home and we had just kind of like talked and whatever. And, then it was the question, my dad worked for Dow, and it's like, well, do you think Dow's a target? And yeah, I think Dow's a target. And it was just a very, very odd day. And it was interesting. It was a very interesting day. The album was great and very appropriately timed. You think about the songs that came out of that album and just like the day, like that time period, like the Youth of the Nation, and just like all the songs that kind of came out of that album. And they're just like, I don't know, felt like they were kind of, I don't know, like even like Here Comes the Boom, because it was like, and we as America are going to bring the boom on whoever did this. And it was like this like anthem for people like, yeah, like it became a military song, which was weird. But yeah, it was very,
or Satellite, it's
Satellite.
I see, basically God saying, I see you.
Yeah. I know what's going on. Yeah. And so, yeah, it was a very odd time, but it was also a very, it was interesting. It was interesting to see. And that leads into our next question. And it's like, how was life different after? And I think that from that day forward, I loved, George Bush's speech. Like, we know what evil is. And he started talking about what evil is and the word evil. And we as a culture just kind of like swept evil under the rug. But, it suddenly became to the forefront for all of us. It's like, evil's a real thing and we're seeing it.
Yeah.
And there's people all around the world that are having to deal with this. Now we're dealing with it, and here it is. And what are we going to do about it? And so that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about what came out of that, is seeing the American people and just us as America wake up. And suddenly it was like, hey, there's evil in the world. You gotta make a choice. Like, this is all pretty black and white now.
Yeah.
And at that time, it made everything real black and white. Like, there's evil, there's not evil, so it was, so that's my story. And I feel like that's what came out of it for me. One of the things I saw that came out of it, how life was different.
Life was definitely different for me. I think even being younger, like I was still in those formidable years of like just becoming who I was going to be.
Yeah.
Right? Like, especially middle school and all that stuff that I was going through. But this happens and like shapes an entire generation. Because that's all anybody talked about for like 4 years. Like, literally every year I was in school, like, it progressed. Like, more of the story opened up over the next 8 months after the attack. And you begin to unravel all the networkings, all the things that were happening behind the scenes that we didn't know about at first. Like, some of these people had been watched. They were on a watch list, but just kind of slipped through the cracks in some areas that, it happened. And you start to see this progression of fear through everything we did. Nobody wanted to go to large gatherings. People were speculating. I saw new updated lists every day about, well, we just found this piece of intelligence that said, like you said, Dow was a target. Yeah. This place was a target. Houston was a target. Like, all these different places were on a list that they said was a target. And these other places just happened to be on the list first, and there could be more attacks that are coming. So, living on the coast where we have a huge Dow chemical plant and other plants, like, we lived in fear for like a good year, not knowing if something was going to come eventually. And then the war, obviously, like what you had to experience firsthand back home, we're just getting all the bad news constantly, paired with patriotism that started to become more and more insensitive, to be honest. Like, at first it was great. Like, we did come together and we were like, yeah, we're going to put an end to this. But then the end never came, and it became more fear-mongering and more like just it for me as a kid, seeing that constantly get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's like more control. Oh, we're not done. We're not done yet. We're going to go to this other country too. Or we're going to move into here and do this. Yeah. It just never stopped. And so for me, it became an America that was just filled with war. And I think one of the darkest things I kind of mentioned to you guys before we started this podcast, and I'll talk about it now because I don't want to dwell on this for too long because it's really a hard thing to talk about. And a lot of people don't like this, but for me, the things that stood out the most is that I had friends I went to school with who were Middle Eastern, and they came from that culture. Some of them were Muslim. And after this whole thing unraveled, there was this weird racial tension now that developed. Like people who'd worked together for years now just started to have these tendencies to look at someone different and treat them differently and be afraid of those people because they're like, they're one of them, and just automatically assume that they are a terrorist or could be. So there was like this racism that started to happen that wasn't really there before, especially for Middle Eastern culture. And I saw how it affect several people in our community, and like didn't feel like they could just go out and go to a store anymore.
Right.
They started changing the way they dress because they didn't want to be seen with their garments that would normally
garb,
be religious garments and things like that. I have to not wear those when I go out because then people are going to judge me or look at me differently
or attack you.
Yeah, very much so. And we saw that all over the United States, even on the news and stuff, and it became really ugly really fast.
I remember, because I remember rumors would start. The rumor mill started, and it was like, so and so, that Middle Eastern guy that owns that convenience store over there, he posted. It's like, what, he did what, and so like this. I mean, just some crazy stuff started floating around. So I definitely know what you're talking about. And I hate talking about it because it's an ugly truth. Like it just is. I'm saying that's even for myself. Like the fear was so real after an attack like this, and then not just that attack happened, but being told that it could possibly happen again in your area, and then saying it was this people group who did it.
Yeah.
Right.
It almost like when
even Muslims, in me, I was all so Muslims.
I was so afraid that when I saw them too, the thought was like, could they be infiltrating? Because they'd be gathering intel. I mean, we live right next to Dow. There's several Muslim families work and provide for their families through Dow. Like, is this a thing? And I hate that it came to that. And that's not to say like what we did after the fact wasn't good. There's a lot of good that came. I mean, our hands were forced, really. I mean, when you do that as a country, you should stand up for your people and go after those who do evil, like you said. But it's what you do after that defines the character. And I think we took a lot of wrong steps.
Fear does that.
It does.
Yeah, it really can challenge the character. I mean, of a person. Obviously the character of a nation.
Sure.
And you made it, and you said it well. I mean, there was some patriotism that turned into nationalism, that then turned into racism. You know, which is a natural progression as those things get blown out of proportion, for lack of better words. And that's unfortunate that happened. It's something that's happened all through our history, and it's not just our history, but you can definitely see through our history for sure.
Human nature.
Right?
Yes. Right. There's that sin nature of you said that fear does that too, and that's one of the side effects of fear is that you start to try to protect yourself, which means then if you can keep others down or away, like whatever, that starts to come out. And we saw that happen in real time. So, we had another view of that evil that we're talking about, and that wasn't out there. It was in here. Yeah.
And desperate people do desperate things. And when people got desperate, that's exactly what happened. We all wanted to feel safe, and there was some, there's some things that we were willing to be like, I'm cool without that. As long as I feel safe, I think, that happens as well. You talked about, Ray, you said something about like people didn't want to gather. And to a degree, I would, I saw that too. But the other thing, speaking of gatherings, one thing you couldn't ignore was the fact that churches were packed.
Yeah, churches for sure.
Even the government went to church. Like that was some of the things we saw that following week, where like churches filled with the president, senators, politicians. And I don't know if that was the cynic in me was, is that posturing? But like they were all there. So I think there's a part of that where people are like, hey, we're all scared. Yeah. And in this moment, we'll all recognize some things that we would debate later on. But like, in case there's, I'm for sure, for some, it was like, in case this is real, I'm going to hedge my bets and make sure that, I'm going to be at church.
It's that old, there's no atheist in foxholes.
That's right.
And so,
Yeah.
Man.
And then, you know, going to the patriotic side, man, if you were an establishment that sold American flags, you know, you sold out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, you know, that we would come, you know, that's also cyclical too, depending on what's going on in our history where, you know, if some people are like, they're anti-American, but we live here. Of course, you have the freedom to say whatever, you know, but in moments like that, then it's like, you know, God bless America and let's stand together and, you know, let's be unified. And, you know, everyone was like waving the flag, and then you can have those moments where as that wanes and, you know, people settle back down in, it's like, you know, you have the opposite kicking. But I did think, you know, that was one of the things that I thought was life different afterwards, you know. A lot of patriotism. Flying was never the same.
No.
And still isn't.
That definitely changed.
Yes. Yeah.
Still have to take my shoes off.
Yeah. Flying is very, 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 very different now.
Yep.
Yeah. I am very often randomly picked for a pat down.
Yes. And by often, he means every time he goes to the airport.
Pretty much every time.
All of the times.
95% of the time. I'm always the random search guy.
Yeah.
Because again,
Asian.
it's the Summation part. Yeah. It's the Summation part. It's me. Yeah. And I just have fun with it. Like, and they start doing the pat down, I'll do the Pillsbury Doughboy thing. Woo!
Get to the belly.
But just is what it is.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a big change. Airport flying. I remember being able to go and like see the plane land, and like your family comes off and you can run up and you do the whole scene. They still do that in television, but obviously that's not the way things were.
It's not realistic. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a big change.
And nowadays in those commercials, you just see a person getting tackled halfway running to their family. Never make it.
You know, now, I think the world in general looked different, but for America or for the U.S., I'll say.
Yes.
Was completely different. I think what you said earlier, Eric, about, you know, that kind of waking up and realizing, hey, you know, other places deal with this all the time.
Yeah.
And now we're in that. Like we see, okay,
we have a reference.
We're not untouchable.
Yeah.
I think that changed a lot of people's view on like safety here.
Yeah. Sure.
Yep. Yeah. I know we're down on the time, and we like to try to keep within a certain bound, but I'd love to spend some time on this last portion, because really what we're trying to do here today is honor the people who risked their lives, who sacrificed their lives, and put it on the line when all of this happened. We have stories upon stories of heroic things that happened in the events of all of this, even leading up to the first plane hitting. I mean, things that we could never even have known about unless somebody had shared their story. But this last question here is, how should we honor a day like this? And I know there's many ways you can do it, but simply, I think just by never forgetting, continuing to talk about it, continuing to bring up the importance of the people who lost their lives and the people who served to protect this nation after something like that. Just lest we forget, right?
Yeah. And I think it's important to kind of what we've already done. You know, you talk about the good, you talk about the bad.
Yeah. What we learned from it.
Yeah, because, you know, if we don't deal with what, you know, that bad, the evil part of it, then we're just going to do it again, right? Like the next time we'll go through the same cycle and it'll just get a little bit worse. So yeah, like even reflecting on that aspect of it, even though that's kind of hard.
It is. Yeah.
One of the things that I did after this, I've always loved different cultures. And so I had worked in an electronics manufacturing plant in Sugar Land before I went back to BC, and I had some very devout Muslim friends. And so when this whole thing happened, I did not really understand honestly, it's always kind of been a blind spot for me, but I grew up, hey, we're all one race. There's not multiple races. And we're all, you know, all came from Adam and Eve. So we're all one race. And so there's different cultures and different religions and different nationalities. But so when I had these Muslim friends and I understood who they were and I understood what they were about, one of the things that came out of this for me, and I think it is a way that we can honor, is to go the other direction with this and not try to alienate ourselves and try to draw away and hide behind our bunkered walls, but to reach out and to understand and to have relationships with people that we wouldn't normally have relationships with. Be open, be loving, especially as Christians. Like, love people, love on people. And so that was one of the things that I became more intentional about after this was when I went down to Texas A&M Corpus Christi, I made sure that I had Muslim friends. I'd go out of my way and be like, hey, you want to come on over and we'll have, I'd have lunch, we'd talk, and had some really good friends who came from a Muslim background. Some of them were devout Muslims, some were just grew up in that, but recognizing that people are just people and that they all need to be loved. And that's where things change, is with us. Loving people and treating people with respect and honor and trying to have understanding. That's where the things change. Like nations, they're going to do what they're going to do.
They rise and fall.
They rise and fall. There we go.
Yeah.
But, the reality is we have a call, and, especially once again, us as Christians, we have a calling to love people.
Yeah.
And to not be caught up into nationalism or, even certain forms of patriotism.
Right.
I once knew a guy who was from Haiti, and I once said to him, I said, hey, my Haitian brother? And he goes, no, I am not Haitian. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, I was like, but I thought you're from Haiti. He goes, I'm from Haiti, but my citizenship is in heaven. And I was like, amen, brother. Awesome.
That's good.
And so that recognition of like we are all the same in God's eyes. He created us all equally, and we need to treat everybody that way.
Yeah, that's good. It's very good.
It's interesting. You say love everybody, love your neighbor. I think one thing that this did was, up to this point, we've had enemies, and obviously you go back another generation, and they would say Germans and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
But like we forgot, right? Like our generation didn't grow up with that, and so it gave us the understanding of when Jesus says, "Love your enemy," of this is what it actually would look like.
Yeah.
Because most people would be like, "Oh, my enemy is like the person that like just talked bad about me at school or whatever," right?
Yeah.
No, it's
And
somebody who
like,
really is against you.
No, like
With a hatred for you.
this. Yeah, this is what an enemy looks like, and love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's. I mean, I'm not talking about Muslims. I'm talking about like people that just hate
Whoever.
whoever it is. And that was like, I think for a lot of people, the first experience of what an enemy is.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Eric, what do you think? How can we honor a day like this, man?
I think you said it well. I mean, it's what is the slogan on every one of the bumper stickers? What is it? Never forget.
Yeah.
Always remember.
Yeah.
Several of those slogans, and one of the ways that we have to go about this is continuing the conversation. As a school teacher teaching history, I've heard words come out of my students' mouths like, "Why do we have to learn about this? This didn't affect us." Because literally, none of the students that we teach today were alive during this time, and so that's a stark reality. But it doesn't. It's not just for 9/11. That's the reason why you teach history. Period. Why do we need to learn this? Because we know that history has a tendency to repeat itself, and we learn from mistakes and bad decisions, but we also learn from victories and triumphs. And so to understand history is to understand the present and to also plot the future for, tomorrow, or plot steps for tomorrow. So you got to keep having that dialogue and in bringing up the importance of, this is what sacrifice looks like. This is like what hatred looks like. This is what the response to that looks like, and how you can have, a say in what that looks like in your life. So that's the way you bring it home, is when these moments happen, like the "where were you" wins. When you have those moments, you can actually have those conversations with people, and it lead to something beyond their experience just that day. Like Lee said, it launched a different perspective towards people, or more intentionality towards people, which I think is beautiful fruit from allowing something like this to change a perspective. So keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I agree. One of my favorite things ever is I love to watch interviews from people who served in World War II. Things like Band of Brothers have this in it, and other documentaries and stuff you can watch. And I love hearing the stories of what they experienced and where they were and how they dealt with our nation becoming under attack when the bombing at Pearl Harbor happened.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of this because one of the reasons why I grew up with so much respect for the men and women who served and brought us to where we are today, when the world was facing an adversary that was evil, like pure evil, what they were doing to people groups and communities around the world. And it makes me think about this, and like, this is what we as people who've experienced this can learn from, not only what we faced, but also the things that we did that came out of greed and fear.
Yeah.
And say, I think these things were good, but these things we definitely need to learn from. And as we continue to talk and share, we become those wise old men and women who tell the stories of World War II, and we can bring those on to the generations who don't think this affects them.
Yeah.
And so I encourage anybody who's listening to the podcast, if you were there, if you experienced this, tell your story, keep this alive. It honors the memory of everyone involved, those who lost their lives, those who served. This allows us to continue to be better, to learn from our mistakes, and also continue to be thankful for the love that we can receive through things like this that bring us together. There's a lot of gratitude to be had for that. The camaraderie that comes from just being united against something which is actually evil. I mean, as Christians, we are united in Christ against evil powers, and there's something that brings us together with that. But continue to share the stories. Those of you who are listening that may be younger, you didn't experience it, you didn't know, somebody in your family who's older than you, I promise, went through this. Simply ask them these questions. Where were you that day? How was your life different? And then how do you honor? But thank you so much for being involved in this podcast about 9/11. I know it's a little heavier, but thank you so much for spending your time with us. And we'll see you next time on the 4THOUGHT podcast.